Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and in this video we're going to look at a monopoly model again and just use that model to illustrate an increase in demand and the impact on total revenue and profit as a result. There are previous videos in this series where we were dissecting a paper 2 style exam, and we were using this particular article, snippets of text from this article. So again, the great thing about paper 2 is that it gives you the ability to apply your economic model in the real world context, and it also gives you a catalog of real world events that you could apply in a paper 1 part B section. And also it helps with paper 2 is also useful in learning how to dissect an article for an internal assessment. So it's good practice for an IA, and also the applications of paper 1 part B and paper 2 practice. So in this situation, we were looking at OPEC and OPEC being pressured by developed nations and developing nations to increase output. And this is going back in the spring of 2022 as a result of the Russo Ukrainian War, reduced supplies of petroleum from Russia due to sanctions. That's driving price up. And we can see that here in this chart. This chart is showing crude oil over a 5-year period. And this drop here is a result of a price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, as well as the beginning of the COVID lockdown and dramatic reduced demand. This is the reduced demand from COVID and the price war that was set off by Saudi Arabia. And right here, February 2022, we see the spike in crude oil prices right at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, sanctions imposed on Russia, reducing global supply of petroleum into the world market. And the article, this Bloomberg article, is dated around May, and that's leading up to the summer season. And there's the expectation that there'll be rising demand for petroleum as people demand more gasoline to travel, taking road trips, travel by plane, taking advantage of holidays that they were not able to do during the COVID lockdown. So this article is looking at this rising demand, this expectation of rising demand for gasoline and thus petroleum as we head into the summer season. So here's the text from that article that I used in creating a paper 2. In previous videos that are going to be linked in the video notes below, we dissected a few questions and applied different models. So again, looking at this, Saudi Arabia, scarcity of refining capacity, no refining capacity. This is a determinant of the elasticity of the supply curve. If a firm is at or near full capacity, then their supply curve is going to be very inelastic. And since there's no close substitute for petroleum as an input to produce gasoline, it has a very inelastic demand curve as well. Typically, primary commodities have inelastic demand and supply curves. I want to use the monopoly model to illustrate, or the collusive oligopoly model to focus on this particular point here. It says here, soaring demand ahead of the U.S. peak U.S. driving season is sending refining profit margins and revenue, total revenue and profits, to extraordinary heights, benefiting refiners, including Saudi Aramco. So that's why I'm going to use this model to illustrate increased profits, increased revenue. So this is a model that I used in a previous video. We were graphing a collusive oligopoly, that being OPEC, the exporting nations that are part of this cartel. In that previous video, we went over what is a collusive oligopoly, what is a cartel, and the benefits to firms or exporting nations that are participating in this cartel. So the member countries, a part of OPEC, are collectively becoming a monopoly. So we can use a monopoly model to illustrate that. So we drew this in that previous model video, and now let's illustrate a shift outward in the demand curve. So I'm going to draw a demand and marginal revenue curve to illustrate this, as we see here. And I'm going to change a few things. So this will now be D1 is equal to our marginal benefit, equal to our average revenue. And this will be D2 over here. D2, marginal benefit 2, and the average revenue. So we're going to have our demand curve shifting out. This will be marginal revenue 2, and this will be marginal revenue 1. Okay, so the black curves is illustrating that increase in demand. Okay, so demand for petroleum provided by this collusive oligopoly is increasing. So we're showing a non-price determinant shifting that demand curve outward. Okay, so it's shifting outward. All right, perhaps we can say tastes and preferences, households no longer locked in, no longer afraid to travel by car or by plane, are more willing or prefer to now travel, and now they're taking to the roads in the U.S. on road trips, and they're traveling. Their preference to travel by car, their preference to travel by airplane has changed as we exit the pandemic, and now there is this increase in demand. So demand is increasing from D1 to D2. Okay, so here we have this marginal revenue curve as well being illustrated. And now we need to just illustrate profit maximization. And we would remember from the previous video, and I have other videos that explain this concept, that if the objective of the firm is to profit maximize, it's achieved when the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, and that will set output. So here we have that point set where MR equals MC. Here's our MC curve. Here's our marginal revenue curve. So that sets out output here. I'll call this Q1, and this here will be Q2 when the demand curve shifts out. Okay, and then we got a price according to our demand curve. So here we have at that quantity, this is what people are willing and able to pay. So here is P1, and then right here are the costs of production. Okay, so I'm going to label this. Let's just change the labeling here. This is now P1, which is equal to the average revenue. And this is the costs of production, costs on average, ATC1. Okay, and here we can see that at Q1, price 1 is greater than cost 1, or average revenue is greater than average total costs. So the firm is generating supernormal profit. And the supernormal profit is within this boxed area here, which I'll illustrate. All right, so this boxed area is the original supernormal profit for the exporting countries participating in this collusive oligopoly. And we can also, well, I'll get to that later. And then when the demand curve shifts out from D1 to D2 and marginal revenue shifts out from MR1 to MR2, due to that rising demand, as the article states, we're looking at soaring demand ahead of the peak U.S. driving season. It's going to increase profits and revenue. So the demand is increasing, marginal revenue is increasing as well. So here we have output at Q1, and at Q1 it sets the quantity, the price here, and costs of production here. This is our average total cost curve. So here we have our supernormal profit. Then demand increases. Okay. So demand increases from D1 to D2. Fine. So now we're going to follow that rule of MR equals MC. Here's my MC curve, my marginal cost curve, and it's getting very busy in this model. This purple line right here is my marginal revenue curve. Okay, so MR equals MC right at that point, and that sets output at Q2. So quantity of output's increasing from Q1 to Q2. And here, MR equals MC at Q2, and we price according to our demand curve. So here's the higher price, and here is the cost. And that will provide a price of P2 equal to AR2. And here we have our costs to equal to our costs on average. Okay, so when the demand curve shifts out, yes, we do see the supernormal profit has increased. So D1 shifts out to D2. So now at Q2, we can see that the price of P2 is greater than the costs of C2, or AR2 is greater than ATC2. Here we say that's 1. And so the firm is generating more supernormal profit. All right, the profit margins have increased from this black shaded area, then demand increases and the profit margin increases to this entire green shaded area. Okay, so it holds in this model that yes, when demand increases, that does increase the profit margins for this collusive oligopoly, and it will also increase the total revenue. So let's illustrate the change in the total revenue. Okay, so total revenue as a formula is, let's see if we can find some space, total revenue, and let's say TR1 is equal to the initial price of P1 times Q1. And I'm going to shade in that area so we can see that. So total revenue is price times quantity. So here is the initial price, and this is the initial quantity at Q1. So it's this rectangular area here. All right, so that entire brown area is the total revenue before the demand shifts out. And the demand shifts out D1 to D2. So total revenue 2 is now equal to the price of P2, the higher price of P2, times the increased quantity of Q2. And what does that look like? Let's use kind of a purplish color, perhaps. Okay, so now it is this higher price, P2, times Q2. So yes, total revenue has increased as a result of that increase in demand. All right, so there we see it. So we can see that total revenue 2 is greater than total revenue 1. So this collusive oligopoly is going to generate more total revenue as a result of the increase in demand and the increase in the price. And they're also going to generate greater supernormal profit due to the fact that average revenue, this area here of AR2 minus ATC2, that's our height, multiplied by the quantity of Q2, this entire value is going to be greater than the previous supernormal profit of AR1 minus ATC1, right? That height multiplied by the base of Q1, right? This value here, this supernormal profit here, is greater than this. So yes, all right, we see demand increases, profits does increase, revenue does increase. We can use this model to illustrate that that is the case. So that's something I just wanted to show you, how we can use this monopoly model to illustrate demand increasing, an increase in supernormal profit, an increase in total revenue. On an IB exam, would they ask you to draw something as complicated as this? Perhaps not, but perhaps in an internal assessment, this could be something that you could use if it's appropriate. And that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment those questions below, And don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.